have it.
You ready? Okay. And everybody's here. Nice to see everybody. Welcome to September, back to school. I always have this, my life seems to think, I think September should be the beginning of the year, not January. But that comes from too many years of school and too many years of university, and I. Nice to see everybody. Welcome to September.
Nothing better than that, if you're
Yeah, that was exciting. Anyways, I got out a new pencil for tonight, so my school supplies, I do have to say I still like to go and look at the school supply aisle.
Peruse.
Yeah, peruse through. So I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered here this evening is the traditional territory of the Sinaiaks, the Tanaha, and the Silix, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. Are there any late items? None were brought to my attention, so I'm assuming not. And I do have a slight change to the agenda, and if somebody would support it, I would like to move Corporate Services is doing an update, and it's in the report section. And usually when we get to reports, we're kind of, it's the monthly statement, and we tend to just go through it. And I would like to actually pull out Corporate Services and have that for about 10 minutes under item 6, because we don't have a workshop educational session scheduled for today. So if everybody is okay with that, that'll just be the little change to tonight's agenda, as it will have the Corporate Services report given at item 6 as opposed to 14C, I think is where it falls.
Do you need to vote on that, Mayor?
Well, you need to vote to adopt the agenda as amended. So moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Pinero. All those in favor, and that carries. Thank you very much. We don't have any minutes from the previous meeting attached. So that means we're up. So. Do you want to be there, or you want to be there?
I'm really comfy here. I don't know if I can actually make it.
Want me to go there and let minutes before?
I'm supposed to be able to make this work, so. Let me just see here.
So I guess if anyone was planning to come and look at this at the end, they'll just go to the YouTube to watch it? Is that?
Sure.
Will it change on, so people will know where to, I guess,
It'll just be.
I'm just confused for the public is what I'm saying.
This is what they see.
This is what they'll see this.
Okay,
Yeah.
so doesn't really reflect the agenda and that doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, it's there that we moved up the report from 14 to 6.
You'll follow it through with the minutes as opposed to the agenda,
Okay,
right?
got it, thank you. That's,
Okay. Thank you. It's not very often that Corporate Services we get to tell everybody what we've been up to, so really appreciate this. I would just like to let you know that our key activities for Corporate Services include legislative services, human resources, records management, the youth center, which also includes the campground and the farmers market, communications and accessibility. So we are here to ensure that we meet statutory requirements organization-wide. We manage municipal agreements, bylaws, and policies. We also process Freedom of Information or FOI requests. We design and implement, we are designing, and then we will implement a records management program. So we are in the process of getting everyone standardized across the organization in terms of how we store our records or file electronically. We coordinate and support council and council committee meetings. We also coordinate internal and external communications, so anything you see on our website or our media releases or Facebook or Instagram is done by our communications coordinator, Ginger. We manage the human resources component of the city, and we empower an inclusive and accessible city, and then we also create an inclusive, fun, safe, and accessible activities for youth and children at the youth center. It's hard to be in charge of everything, the technology and the report. So I just want to report out on a few stats for everybody, just so that you understand kind of where we're at and what we've been up to for 2023. So we responded to and fulfilled 15 Freedom of Information requests. We have written 5 privacy impact assessments. So we're required to, for any new software or program that the city purchases or utilizes, we are required to write a privacy impact assessment, and that is just to look at our risk level. We have completed 57 statutory right-of-ways or covenants. We've completed 68 legal agreements. That includes leases. In communications, we have posted 233 social media posts. That's just for the city, so that doesn't include Nelson Hydro or police. We have done 30 reels, podcasts, or behind-the-scenes little video clips that we've posted on social media, which are getting a lot of uptake. People are really enthusiastic about them and watching our reels, because really they're snapshots of sometimes employees at the city, sometimes the work that we do in the city, like plowing snow or collecting garbage, or putting out tax notices, that sort of thing. So that's gives people a little peek into what it is that we do here at the city. Facebook, we actually have 11,500 followers, which is significant. So that's something to be proud of. Ginger's worked really hard to get that number, to reach that number. We have 700 Instagram followers. We've put out 7 council highlights and 7 city newsletters. So those really highlight any work that council does, the newsletter as well as the council highlights. We've done 42 meeting agendas and minutes. We have had 138 summer camp registrations, and that is, that's not every day. That's sort of registrations for the whole summer. We've had 171 registrations for out-of-school or after-school programming. That was for 2022-23, and then for 23, for this part of 23 so far, we've had 90. Not sure what those numbers are, a little confusing. The youth center has written and received grants for $12,000. Our campground has generated $121,000 in revenue to date. So that's just for we still have another month and a half of bookings to go for the campground.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, through the chair. With the bookings, the campground, is that more or less than the last bunch of
Yeah,
years?
good question. I don't know. I can't tell you the answer to that right now.
I can,
Okay.
because we,
Thank you.
we sort of thought this question might come up. So no, I was just looking now, we're pretty close to on par where we were this time last year, with another, like you say, month and a bit to go. So we should hit pretty close to budget by the end of the year.
Is
Yep.
is supplemental?
Sure.
Thank you. Is the campground maintaining and kind of like full? Is it regularly full, or is there a fluctuation?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have a better clue on
It is.
actual numbers.
It's
yeah.
full, and there's often a wait list. When there's during the smoky time of year, whenever that may be, we tend to suffer a little bit. We get a lot of cancellations, but every other time of the year from the beginning of June onwards until the end of October, we're pretty full.
Thank you very much.
We have 190 vendors at the farmer's market, so we're also full there. We're at capacity for vendors. There's often a wait list for vendors, which is awesome. And then we've had 55 external hires and 17 internal hires.
Mayor,
Yes.
could I go back to the market?
Sure.
So I'm thinking of the market, 190. So are there different ones that, because when you go down to either of the market, there's not 190 vendors there. So are these people that come in for a certain period of time, or is this Market Fest nights, or?
Nope, we have 190 vendors registered. Some may come to Cottonwood on Saturdays, some may come to, show up on Baker Street on Wednesdays. Sometimes they come to both markets. So those are the vendors. It's not per market. It's like, that's sort of our cache of vendors for all of the markets.
And some of them are rotated.
And some of them
Yeah,
rotate, yeah, I was gonna
some-
say, because I met last week two people, I said, oh, you have not been here before, and they said, oh, we're just coming now, we've been on the wait list, we're waiting for a slot, to get in.
So would they be included in the 190 if they're on the wait list?
Well, I think once they get in, then they're,
That once they're in, they're in. The other thing is that I did not include number of vendors for like Market Fest or Harvest
okay.
Fest.
I will just be paying more attention when I go down there tomorrow then. I did not see 85 vendors at either one of those markets, so I must
Well,
be
it-
missing something.
It's the total number of
total number.
signups for those
Yeah.
seasons. So a vendor might come for a couple of weeks and then not come for a couple of weeks. Right, but and they can have a maximum amount of people they can fit in each day.
Right.
But
Oh,
this,
well,
that
I
would
can
be the
explore
total
it further.
number.
Yeah,
It just didn't make
sure.
sense to me, and that's
Okay.
why I asked the question.
Does it make more sense now?
No, I'll explore it further.
Okay, all right.
It obviously makes sense to everyone else.
So our focus for the rest of the fall in human resources is to be planning for September 30th. That's the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So internally, we are offering, this year we're offering a course to staff. It will be a requirement that it be completed by the end of December of this year, so that everyone has sort of like a baseline understanding and knowledge of First Nations in the area, which is great.
Is that all staff? What
All
staff will
staff.
be?
All staff,
So all city staff?
all city staff, yeah.
And it's an online opportunity, or?
We haven't fleshed it out 100% yet. We'll be talking about it at our department head meeting on Thursday.
And is there an actual event happening? I know the 30th is a holiday, but is there an event type thing coordinated by the city, or?
There is, no,
Okay.
not coordinated by the city, but we support, there is an event happening down at Lakeside on the 30th, which is the Saturday.
Yep.
And we always support our events. So, but it's not a city event.
And SD8 is doing an event again as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so with the province now declaring this a stat, then all our collective agreements kicked in. So some didn't have that in the past, and so we had our own event, but now that it's official provincial stat, then we're obligated to follow that, but certainly encouraging our employees to attend these type of events. That's certainly what I heard from them, is that we shouldn't dictate what they do, but so hopefully they don't treat it just as another just a stat day, and take some time to reflect on what this day is about, and certainly we'll encourage that, and yeah, I know our employee base is interested in reconciliation, so we're gonna get that message out.
HR is also providing training around a new inclusive guide to hiring. So we have some training happening at the department head meeting at the end of September, and then it'll kind of trickle down through other staff who participate in hiring, and then to new hires. Any new hires will go through this process. And that is part of our EDI training. That's sort of where that stemmed from. So hopefully it'll make a difference and it will be inclusive. And the other thing that HR is working on is revamping the corporate safety and JOSH committee process. So taking a look at what we have in place right now for our JOSH committee and corporate safety committee and seeing whether or not it works or doesn't work or could be improved and how we can do that. So we're kind of working through that process. And both of those committees at the moment meet monthly. So
I have a question about your Josh. What joint, so what joints are in there, like joints?
yeah, so we're fairly unique in that our JOSH committees, we have more than one. So our corporate, now I need my glasses back on, but our corporate safety committee includes every department, a representative from every department, and then the JOSH committees are represented by department. So each department tends to have their own JOSH committee.
I used to sit on the fires.
Okay. And so we're trying to figure out, like, is that realistic? Does that work for the numbers that we have in the city?
Sorry, and do I understand correctly that some departments have more than one bargaining group, or the bargaining group's kind of divided by departments as well?
Yeah, so, yes, pretty well. I guess most of our departments have, fire has QP employees and fire, so does IBW, so does police. So they do have unionized staff from more than one bargaining group.
And Councillor Tate, on the corporate safety committee, it is one union rep and one management, one exempt staff that sit on that, from each department that sit on that committee. The Youth Center, looking at annual programming for 2024. So we start now to figure out what 2024 looks like for camps, after school programming and other programming. We're looking at an alternative booking system for the campground. I think finance will be happy about that. Right now, the system that we use is pretty labor intensive, so we hope to change that a little bit. We'll continue to research and apply for grants for the youth center, the market, and the campground, and ideally those are pretty fluid. Any grant that we have, we can use amongst the three kind of departments. And also to take a look at our needs for 2024. Review those. In legislative services, we're working on a policy project, so we're reviewing and updating existing policies that will hopefully be done by the end of 2023. That's the plan. It's a big project. We have a lot of policies. You have a lot of policies. We have a lot of combined policies that need to be dealt with and brought up to date. We will also be completing council's strategic plan fairly shortly. Council is heading down to UBCM, which is, what does it stand for? Union of BC Municipalities. Thank you. So we've been working on briefing packages for the minister and staff meetings and getting everything organized for that. And then we plan on holding a council code of conduct workshop at some point in the fall. Oh, thank you. What are you?
Just advance the slide.
Oh, thank you. Totally. Okay.
Just curious, the UBCM information, when will we be receiving that?
So UBCM, we're just doing some final work on that, and so it's been circulated to department heads for any further comments to make sure that we have appropriate background. And it should be in your box by Thursday.
Thank you.
Yes?
I think my next question is under legislative services, but the service agreements that are being worked on with NMAG and the Capitol, I don't see them on this fall plan. Or am I just not recognizing
Well, I
them?
think if you go back to our statistics, we're constantly working on leases and agreements, and that falls within there.
Okay.
Those fall within leases and agreements. So I didn't pull them out and highlight those specifically, but it's just kind of one of those, I would say,
Okay.
day-to-day tasks that we work on.
So not a fall focus then?
No,
No.
I'd say no. For records management, we're continuing with the digitization project, which council approved in I want to say 2020. That seems like quite a while ago. So it is a big deal for local governments to move their hard copy records into a digitized kind of environment and storage environment. So we're working on that. And we're hiring a couple of consultants to help with the development of a records management assessment and roadmap. So that will help our staff who are working on the records management project train staff and figure out what does it actually look like and how do we move forward with it. And then when we bring in new staff, how do we keep them on going down that same road so that everyone will be using the same system. In terms of accessibility, we are working with an accessibility consultant at the moment. We have to develop an accessibility committee. We will be working with the committee to develop an accessibility plan, and we've already created a feedback mechanism, which is through our website. But I'm sure the committee, the accessibility committee, when formed, and the plan will inform how that works and help make it more robust for people who need to use it or people who want to use it.
Sorry, I have another question.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in all the work you do there. So I did see an ad in the newspaper, I believe.
Yes.
For the accessibility
Yep.
committee. So how did you get?
So we haven't,
Good
that was just
response, or-
that was just a heads up.
Oh, hey,
We
it's
will
coming,
be,
not,
it's
yeah.
coming,
No,
so
I do remember that.
I
Okay.
think we will be
So you
putting
didn't
in.
have people rushing to the gate saying, here, I'm ready to go.
Oh, no, we do.
Okay, great.
We do.
That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yes,
That's
it
what I
is.
was interested
It's
in,
very
just the
exciting.
flavor for.
Yeah.
Good.
And then in terms of communications, we are continuing the development of an annual roadmap. So that is for the whole organization, and it's just annually, what do we need to be aware of and what can we plan for ahead of time? Like, what can we plan for? So Ginger's working really hard to get that, particularly with public works. So whether it's make sure your cars aren't parked on the odd side of the road during these days, that kind of thing, so that we can plow on that side of the road. Is that how it works?
Yep.
Something like
yeah,
that.
and it's
I mean, there's much.
around street sweeping. We put out that messaging every spring around plowing, but certain messaging around cleaning leaves. So it's just about hitting that annually. Generally in the towards the end of September, early October, we start talking about picking up your leaves, that type of thing.
Yep.
So just a way to make it a little bit more efficient, a little bit more streamlined, so people start to have this built into their expectations to see it.
Ginger is also creating a communications resource toolkit and training programs. So that means that she will be able to focus on more strategic priorities and less on the day-to-day tasks. So we'll be counting on other departments to do things like notify the public when they're clearing a street or when there's leaf blowing on a street. And she will also be finalizing the social media audit that she's undertaking right now. And that is
great.
that.
Council, any further questions or anything? It seems like corporate services has quite a
basket.
basket. Councillor Page and then Councillor Payne.
Just a small question. I guess targeted towards communications. Are we starting to cross-post on something like TikTok? Or Instagram Reels?
So, no. No, we are not. And I'm not quite sure, I can't even answer the why of that. But at this point, no.
It probably could be something we could start activating pretty labor intensive.
Okay.
It's sorry. Well, yeah, we've. It's something that we have just started bringing up with Ginger from the public works side of it, and looking at the different tools that are out there. Like, is Hootsuite, I think, still around and can help with a lot of that. There's been some issues that we recently have. I think everyone's heard about with some of our posts getting removed from Facebook and possibly Instagram too, due to the new rules. So I know that Ginger was looking into that. I work directly across the hall from Ginger, so she's often there to bend my ear about public works stuff. But yeah, so we're looking at other opportunities to see what else can be posted on, but it's got to be advantageous. And Ginger's also going through this process, as Sarah mentioned, of training our staff in public works and the different departments on how to do a lot of that tactical communication, so that she can be pulled out of that tactical communication and start rolling out those bigger strategies.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we're at. It's not a complete answer, but it's something that we've looked at.
Okay.
Councillor Payne.
I think I actually covered all my questions. I think the one you did mention was we'll have a workshop on the code of conduct. So when we get back from UBCM, we'll have something scheduled, because that's something that I would love to see.
Great. Nothing further? Okay. Thank you very much, Sarah. Now you can go back to still running the show. Oh, sorry, my fault here, because I saw Councillor Page put up his hand. The youth center is no longer involved with the parkade?
No, it is. It still runs the parkade, essentially. Runs up there every day, deals with the dailies, deals with the monthly parkers or parking permits. Yep.
Okay, because you never
Absolutely.
mentioned it. You did.
I did not mention it.
Yeah, you did
It's
the
one of those-
campground and you didn't
Yeah.
mention the parkade.
I didn't highlight it, no. But it is one of the tasks that the youth center manages, for sure.
Okay, excellent. When was the last time we had the youth center in?
She is coming back. She will be here in November.
Okay, perfect. It's always good to have an
She
update
being
from.
Terry Wilkinson, the manager.
Great. Well, it'll be good to see Terry come in, and she's got lots of great ideas and lots of enthusiasm, so that'll be something to look forward to. Okay. So moving back into the other parts of the agenda, we are at item number 7. So, City Manager, do you have a report?
I will tag team with others on this. So yeah, back into fall, certainly, wrapping up a number of projects, and people are anxiously, there's a lot of various things going on. Obviously, the OCP is something that's a big consultation process. Harris is chairing that. I've got a recent update. It sounds like they're pretty pleased. The public survey is wrapping up, I believe. Is it this week? Still hoping to hear from others. And, I think there's, especially that younger age demographic, we haven't heard a lot from. So if you have people in those age groups, make sure they participate in this as well.
They're on TikTok.
They're on TikTok. All right, I'm not sure we're going to get that between now and then, but
Take the same
anyway,
videos.
encourage them the old school way of filling out a survey. I know that's challenging, and they'll look for other ways to engage over time as well.
Now that schools are back, have we reached out to?
I believe that is part of the process is to reach out to they did mention they're going to be in the schools. They reached out to some various classes to get.
Because the survey is closing down on the 14th, isn't
Yeah.
it? 14th or 15th?
Yeah, there's going to be other strategies that they will incorporate to go out to get information. This survey isn't the only
Yep. No,
strategy
I get
that's.
it. Yeah, they've
being
got
used.
450 responses, which the person who presented yesterday felt was good. We were aiming for 1,000, so fell a little bit short of that one.
As Sarah mentioned the strat plan. I am going to send something out to you, or get Maddie to send something out. Those larger overarching goals. Just want to hear what they mean to you. How would you define them? I don't know. Maybe we'll do that on Thought Exchange so people can resonate with and it doesn't have to be a paragraph, it just, what words would, if we're achieving those goals, what would that look like, so that we kind of are really, more clear on what the intent of council is in those broader goals. So we'll do that. The revenue requirement for Nelson Hydro, we've finally completed that process, and that is with the Utility Commission to ultimately make a decision on the 2023 rate, and we will be, as you might have got notice, we are going to be starting to work on the 2024 rate, which is, we have to get to the Utility Commission by the end of October. So this was the first year with the using the COSA, which, as council is aware, we have asked for a reconsideration of some of the principles, so we're still in uncertain times on that. But so hopefully, just for council's knowledge, if you recall, the 9.87%, over 6% of that is the transition to the the COSA, the catch up for when we weren't allocating costs fully into the rural area. The actual increase for 2023 was below 4%, which was, I think actually quite in line with what happened on the urban side of it as well. So once we get this, once we catch up and get this in place, then we're hopefully back to more inflationary increase. We certainly have a large capital plan that's going to put rate pressure on. FortisBC, I understand, just filed for a 4.84% rate increase for 2024, which obviously puts a lot of pressure on our rates as well. So that's where we're at with the revenue requirement, and the reconsideration is again before the Utility Commission to make a decision on that side of it.
Is that the last, through the chair, is that the last step, or can there be another appeal after that?
For the city, not through.
For either side. Because we're almost into the next year, so that's why I was curious, like, does it have to come to a decision at some point? Like, where is the end?
Ultimately, yeah. No, there's, this is the last, on the cost of service review, this is the last process through the Utility Commission. Council could, if we're not satisfied, we could ask for a judicial review of that decision. They, all government bodies have to basically follow their own due process and their own legislation, and a citizen or an organization can appeal that to the courts, and it's the courts ultimately that would make a decision whether they've, that part of it, whether they've followed due process or their decisions met with their legislation. So our hope is that a reasonable decision is made on this reconsideration. It really is holding up how we, I think in a lot of ways, how we approach projects. How do we manage? And I know we have one of our meetings is to raise that with the minister, that this current very regulation heavy process that we're going through, like I said, we're in September of 23, we're trying to get rates approved that were for all of 23. We're all the way through the year before we ever get a decision, and it's a substantial cost for ratepayers of all that regulation. And City Council's regulated rates for our electric utility for years and years and years, and BCUC in the past had a pretty hands-off approach, and I think maybe there's some middle ground where we wouldn't be incurring those significant regulatory costs, but still, there's still have that opportunity for input and just that public process part and keep our rates reasonable. I note that there's a private utility that really looks at BC Hydro rates, and they're capped by BC Hydro rates. So we proposed something like that in the past, that maybe Fortis BC is the cap, and as long as we can manage within those, then we're setting fair rates for our area. So yeah, we're still working through that. So I'll let maybe Chris speak to the Hall Street Pier. I think you didn't see a ton of action this summer. And do you want to talk to that part of it?
Yeah, sure. So I've come in sort of part of the way through this, but so the Hall Street Pier, ultimately where we're at right now, is just waiting for the finalized designs have gone out to actually have the canopy structure built for the pier, and that process so consists of a couple of steps, one of which is fabrication of the sort of main frame of that, and then there's a secondary piece to look at all the sort of fixtures that allow for the cladding and such to be attached to it. So essentially how the process has gone is resulted in what appears to be an amount of time of no work down there, whereby council had determined, I think in March, to go ahead with the canopy, and then through that window after that went through the design process, and we had a bit of an issue with the architect or the consultants that were looking at the design. One group walked away from the project. Fortunately, we were able to find another one that could come in and actually complete it. So all of that is kind of, compounded a little bit to result in this longer gap. But, ultimately, we're looking good and on schedule to have it done. Structure should be up and essentially structure and roof should be up, and then by the end of the year, and then the cladding will be, sort of starting in late December. So the wood cladding that goes around it. So, anticipating to be complete sort of within the next, 5 months now. We done a lot of work on the front end sort of in the last couple of months with the design to try and reduce the number of surprises that occur when the structure actually starts getting erected. I think that's something that I've heard of had happened, previously maybe a little bit, but the designs can be all lovely and wonderful, but then you start putting them together, and that's when sort of costing, can really get out of hand and start increasing. So a lot of that upfront work was done on the engineering and design. But yeah, feeling pretty good about where we are now despite the delay.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add before you jump in there. So basically we had, as Chris said, one team, and that was from the beginning. And that, I think if those that were on council at the time, this was sort of a COVID project where we're trying to stimulate local business, I guess, and support our local businesses. And one of those businesses got super busy. They created the design, but not to a level that it was buildable. So when they walked away, then they really had to take basically a concept and figure out how you actually construct this thing, and that's what's taken the time is to actually get into the detail of how this structure actually works, and how all these things tie together. So which is so really that's what they've been doing over the this since August is actually getting into that detailed design. So it's now out for fabrication, and it'll be fabricated off-site and be erected on-site. So you'll see the structure go up fairly quickly, but and then you got lighting and all those things that go with something like that.
Question, Councillor Lockwood, Councillor Woodward.
To the chair, Chris, the canopy is going to be over top of like a sloping floor, basically. Is that still the case? I guess with the requirement to be a certain height above water, it pushed the whole decking up God, it must be like 4 or 5 feet. And so now you got this slope, and it looks like the canopy is just basically resting over a slope. So having anything sit underneath the canopy, like tables or bands or anything like that, seems like off the table. Anything to report on that? Any solution there?
I haven't heard that as a issue. I always anticipated it would sit forward and not sit on that sloping area, but we'll double check with that. Hopefully that's not where they ended up in design, but
Okay, that'd be good, because I
Yeah.
think that's where it's at. What I see.
Through the chair, I'm wondering about our budget. How's our budget doing at this point on that project?
You've got some more recent updates. It sounds like you guys had some conversations on how they're at. My understanding is, we've got a pretty firm budget and we're sticking to it.
I concur.
Okay.
A lot of attention has been put on that. That the idea that, it's been a long project. It as I understand it, hasn't been the most enjoyable project, especially. So there's been a lot of attention to close it out within, there's always a lot of attention on budget, but I think there's been difficult to construct things during those times. I mean, we continue to sort of live in a world of unknowns when it comes to construction, unfortunately. But yeah, that's why a lot of this early engineering work happened, that's happened over the last sort of month and a bit, was to make sure that, all of a sudden the structure's up there and we go to put the cladding on and it's like, oh, well, where do we bolt this to?
Right.
Oh, there's nothing there, right? So it's really fine tooth comb, gone through it and to ensure that, as exacting as possible.
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, and I think really looking at how to reduce the amount of steel, et cetera, in that canopy was part of that exercise to get this thing within, number one, buildable and within budget. They really had to really figure out how to do this within that budget, and that was reducing material costs.
Okay. Thank you.
Question, Councillor Payne?
So we're just looking at completion of December 2023 then, is that what we're talking about?
I think the cladding goes up and the lighting into the early new year, but the
Okay.
structure should be there by late fall this year.
That's correct.
Okay, so structure this year, lighting next year.
Yeah, I mean, there's just going to be a new year that will roll over there. The project will be rolling. It's not as though it's going to stop or anything. It's just, bumped up.
Opening in the spring, is that what you're
Yes,
thinking?
Correct.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
the Ladybird place I thought was finished, but they haven't moved her in there yet.
Yeah, there's some, again, lighting that has to still go in there. So
Okay.
that's kind of what that's waiting on. And again, there's these supply chains, getting things like lighting and all these things have taken, just take time now to get those things. And, for the fact that, that we're, saw that significant escalation in pricing, 40, 50% is what we're hearing on other projects and we're experiencing. So I think by and large, I think we've, done really well to contain this project and the way we delivered it. So which brings me to the civic.
Sorry.
Yep.
Councillor Page has a question.
As these roll towards completion, are there milestones within that where we can start to allow the public to reclaim the space? Is there ability to phase this, or is this going to stay walled off in its entirety until the very last light bulb goes in? I'm seeing some nodding heads, so.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, you can't really have the public in a construction site and it just creates inefficiencies trying to.
Yeah.
I asked that this summer actually to go, we have this swimming area, could we at least use it? And then it took, they had to get the, the gangplanks up and, it just, then they still have, they cleaned up the site a fair amount, but,
Okay,
they
that's
have
my answer.
materials there.
Secondary?
Yes.
So looking at the press release of the gangplanks on the way down, part of what I'd understood in some of the initial conversations was the accessibility going down to the waterfront specifically are those going to be wheelchair accessible? Because they're not now.
Yeah, I don't, do you know on that one?
I don't, yeah.
I don't know how you could create that on those. You know, it depends on the water level of how steep those are. That's all, yeah, dependent on water levels that, you know, during periods with high water level, it might be, but
I imagine it would be some sort of flexible letdown.
Yeah, that certainly wasn't in the design.
Okay.
If you think about the lakeside one, it's similar.
Just remember the initial visions.
Yeah. You know, I know certainly a strong goal is, you know, being able to bring people down to that waterfront. You know, I know Sarah's working with our accessibility coordinator. She can certainly talk about, I don't know what that looks like of how you assist somebody to, you know, get down to that level, but we can raise that with them because, you know, we all agree accessibility is important to us.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, maybe I'll let Chris Jury, I was going to talk about the Civic. So just we're working through that project, and certainly we've seen significant price and scope escalation in that project. So we're have put it back to the consultants to, you know, to look how we deliver that project in a manner that is more in line with our budgets. You know, council's aware of the roof and the snow loads, and once we insulate that, you know, that puts additional pressure on it. That roof was built before there was building codes. They've modeled it, and there's concerns with, you know, with how it performs in that snow load. So it's back with the consultants looking at, you know, every out of the box solution of how we can deal with those, you know, specifically with that roof, and, you know, just cost escalation. There's 40-50% cost escalation over this last 2 or 3 years. But, you know, that the team is really looking at it to see how do we get those priorities that we have identified, both for the Civic Theater Society and for the city, in terms of accessibility, in terms of, you know, those energy retrofits. And we've been talking with the funders, and we're still waiting on a grant similar to the curling club that was waiting on that grant. It was supposed to be announced by the end of the summer, which is technically still a week away.
Couple days.
So that one that's a really, really challenging project, and we're working hard with people to try to find solutions to a very, very challenging building. Just maybe before I turn it over to Chris, the food cycler program seems to be going really well. We're getting lots of positive responses for that. So we're just gearing up for, you know, rollout to the Fairview neighborhood as opposed to the early adopters, and how we work with that. You know, I think we're meeting with the food cycler folks around. We do have this in that contract that would make a commitment one way or the other on the rest of those about 2,400 additional units. So we're looking at ways, how do we didn't get this out as quickly as we had hoped, so we don't have the data that we're looking for. We're looking at, you know, we have enough units out there that statistically I think we'll get good data from those out there. So we're looking at, you know, how do we get the data we need to, you know, bring to council to make an informed decision on the balance of the units, and and not delay this and still take advantage of that preferred pricing. As I said, you know, we're seeing price escalation across the board, and we locked into a favorable guaranteed price as long as we make a decision. It's supposed to be by the end of this year, but we're working with them to, you know, figure out how we manage through that part of it.
Extend that?
Pardon?
Extend that till we get our independent report back.
Well, we're not going to have those 1,600 out there and do the full report, but what reporting can we get earlier that, you know, give you those key points? You know, what's our diversion rates? You know, what's the what's the reliability, those sorts of things that, that we would see in the rest of the unit. So that's what we're figuring out, is how do we get that best information. Probably not going to have perfect information, but I think you'll have statistically valid information to make decisions, but we'll work with our consultant that we've hired to, to do that final report on that.
Just a question on that.
Councillor Payne, then Councillor Ackerman.
I noticed there's a posting that went out for another individual to support that
Right.
project.
Yeah.
So that's an additional individual. It's not replacing someone that's on the team.
That's correct. So Food Cycler is concerned about the time it's taken us to, get these out into the community. So they're funding some additional support to allow us to.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Where the money was coming from. So
Yeah.
they're funding that position.
Yeah, that's
Perfect.
correct.
Thank you.
Kevin,
Yeah.
the Friday was the opening of, not Friday, was it Friday?
Last
Friday, yeah.
Friday. Last Friday was the opening of the new composting facility, and one of the things I heard come out of that was that there was a much higher than expected volume of material from Calscar and Roslyn. Is that, did anyone figure out why? Like, you would have thought that the modeling coming from the RCK would have been, or whoever, Central Waste would have caught that, but is that that's a good thing? Is that?
Yeah, I think part of it's the time of year. There's lots of yard and garden. They're
Okay.
commingling yard and garden with food waste. So they have a much higher percentage of yard and garden in their compost stream than they're projecting year round. So I think that explains a fair amount of these volumes at this stage. So I think it's early days to really conclude one way or the other what levels of recovery they'll get. It's, yeah, that was, I think they had 1 week's delivery, I believe, is all they've had out there at this stage.
And if it turns out that it's higher than expected, is that still a good thing, or will that forecast
yard-
them? Like, can the facility handle?
Oh, yeah, the facility is way overbuilt.
Good. Okay. And so so that's
Yeah,
a
we
good
went.
thing. I
This
guess.
Yeah,
we
for
almost
sure.
doubled
Yeah,
the
more
size of this
diverse.
facility for some reason during all of the debate around the table at the regional district. So that facility is quite large. It should be able to handle a fair amount of compost
Great.
the way it comes in. So, and that was always the part of the always ongoing sort of discussion at the RD table when I was there, was the fact that if Nelson wasn't going to have all this wet stuff coming, how would it ever run? Because, we
Yeah.
might need to have their volumes, but they had no idea what the volumes were. So everything has been based on sort of a guesstimate that if we go by what the people say, like 40% of your garbage is wet garbage, and if you have this many tons, then you take 40%, and then that should be what the process amount is. But I think until you actually do it,
Yeah.
and measure it and see how it works, you don't really know. And then the other unknown was always whether or not the RDKB would participate in any capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been sort of a bit on again, off again, because they do have a processing facility in Grand Forks. And so then it was always a matter of how would they do collection to get it to to Salmo. So I mean, I think what we need to do now is sit back and hope all those other communities participate and see where it goes. But even more importantly, really is, I think, and I've always had this, and I'm sure that Councillor Page has been vocal about this at the table, is that I think it needs to be mandatory for commercial to be using it. I think this idea that we're gonna ask nicely if like Safeway and Save On and Ferraro's or whatever, would please consider taking their wet waste to Salmo, I don't think is enough. Because even when we go back and look at the reports from the people that were hired by the RD right back at the beginning of this process, their communities that they represented, I believe the woman was from Nanaimo?
Yes.
And it didn't take them very long before they made it mandatory for their large commercial vendors to be participating, that it wasn't optional. So that's really where we need to go to next, for sure. Counselor Pinero.
So, just catch me up here. If the food cycler people are paying for somebody to work with our team, and they're paying their salary, are they? And yet we are in the midst of a trial period for this, right? Like, this is a pilot, and we're dependent on the outcome. I mean, this may be a bit just paranoia or what have you, but how do we ensure that, like, if I'm the food cycler people and I'm obviously looking for a certain outcome here, and I'm involved in the trial itself, do we not get the outcome that, does that not sort of predetermine the outcome a little bit?
This is just someone to help hand out machines.
Hand out
This isn't
machines,
somebody evaluating the success of the program.
Okay,
Yeah.
it won't,
They're not measuring anything.
they're
It's
not
just,
measuring
hiring
the
them.
success
Yeah, and
of
we're
the
hiring
project.
them.
Food cycle element kind of.
Okay.
yeah, it's just about getting them out because it is time. It is time consuming. You can only give out so many because you have to give everybody instruction, right?
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
It just seemed like what being behind schedule and all, and they sort of already, I think we're going to be factoring in less data than we had hoped to begin with. So just every
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah, they're not. No, we've hired an independent consultant of the city and of Food Cycler to evaluate the program. So that's where that evaluation piece will come from.
Thanks.
Yeah, and we've taken a much different approach than, like in Castlegar, they just delivered the bins and there was quite a bit of confusion in the community because they switched, everybody used to have, well, still do, they have these large bins that all their waste used to go into, and then they said, no, that new big bin is actually for your compost, and this little bin we gave you is now for your garbage, and they had a high level of garbage in their first pickups of organics, and so they're just doing sort of that, broad education. We're working individually with people, hopefully, and we'll, that's why it's a pilot. How do we roll this thing out successfully? How do we work with people? Do we need that much effort in the future? All those things we're trying to answer. And right now we're taking a very cautious approach by having these individual workshops and all these things, which are, will certainly lead hopefully to, people being successful, but it's a fair amount of upfront energy to do that level of consultation that, you could have gone the other way and just had general and let the issues come up and deal with them, as they come up, but we've taken a more hands-on approach at this stage. All right, I will pass it on to Chris, but the one unfortunate announcement I have to make is John Topolakovic has resigned. He's gone back to the provincial government, so we'll be refilling that EM coordinator position. We're going to look at how we maybe create a bit more strength and a little bit more maybe succession planning through how we do that. We have some other positions that we've thrown out there. Can they sort of support that EM side there? The fire smart piece is quite separate than the EM side. Is there an opportunity to sort of marry those together a little bit more? We've had discussions with Castlegar as well of, can we work together on some of these things? It's, that position is, that's as far as that role can go in our city. So, you're capped out at that position. So we're not surprised that someone like a John would look for what his career advancement is. And he's certainly moved our plan along and our readiness along. So, that's all we can ask for people. And he'll be working in our community in another role relating to emergency management. So, that's good to have those relationships.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. Through the chair. So obviously, like an incredibly critical position, especially with what we've been experiencing in the summers. Do you think the problem with the role that it's too narrow focused? and then it needs to have a broader spectrum of responsibilities, or like what?
No, I think it's quite a broad position. I think it's more, there's, that's as far as you can advance in that role here is the position that John's in presently. If you want to advance your career and, go on to more and more responsibility, you need to go to a larger center or the provincial government. And I think that's the nature of this position. We might, have someone that's just, that's happy at that level of responsibility and is happy to do that work. I tend to favor, having people that are smart and ambitious and want to move things forward. And if we lose them, then we lose them and bring in somebody else. They've advanced us to a new level, and people can pick up at that new level and move us forward again. So I'm not, first of all, not surprised. And second of all, I don't think it's a bad thing to have people that, advance us and have that talent, and we're not going to hold on to them long term.
Okay. I mean, just a supplemental, I feel like we've come along. John really pushed the ball down the road, and
Yeah.
I'll talk about it if I have a chance here about emergency management
Yeah.
meeting today. But he's done an excellent job coordination of getting a lot of
Yeah.
sectors working together. So very grateful for that.
Yeah, no, I think John has done a great job, and I'm glad that he's staying local so we can, be building those relationships, and it makes it so much easier to build those relationships when you've got somebody that knows your organization and then can, make sure that we're going in the right direction with whatever or whoever the next person is that comes into that role, to really understand, what the relationships are. So, I really wish him all the best. I found he was always so full of enthusiasm. If you saw him at a market or any place, he was always ready to tell you the whole story. And at the Fire Smart evenings that we had, so his enthusiasm was infectious, and so I will definitely miss that. But so glad that he's staying in our community, and is like Kevin says, he's young, and so he needs to climb the ladder as much as he can, and so the provincial government's gotten a good person.
All right, and finally, maybe I'll turn it over to Chris on the sort of the IT side. You might have seen we have a posting out for an IT position. Maybe it's not out yet. It's going out shortly. So share on where we are with NG 911 and our cybersecurity audit, and just the department as a whole.
Yeah, so we did get our assessment back from our consultant that we hired to kind of help us build out what the next gen 911 project and budget would look like. So we're just kind of putting those numbers together now. We had a meeting with her just before this call, so we'll get a little bit more details on that piece. But one of the things, as Kevin was alluding to here, is that recognizing that we need some resources to take us through this process, and some of that will be external consultants. They're the ones that have that next gen 911 expertise and knowledge. But internally, we have the staff, the knowledge of our own systems, of how police operate. So being able to take one of our senior IT staff and put them on this project full time, and then backfill their position as we kind of go through this process. So that's what the posting is, that I think it went out today, is to kind of have that extra resource so that we can have an individual focus on that next gen 911 project over the next, probably couple of years here. And so again, this consultant will help us kind of get that RFP out for the equipment side of things. And then, we'll likely need to have that other third party kind of fill in those knowledge gaps that we don't have internally to kind of help us through that process. So that's where we're at.
So then, sorry, I just want to say it back to you. So we've got someone internally who we would like to put full-time on the next gen 911 project and the posting is for that, but since this project is time limited, is this a time limited contract?
Yeah, so we'd bring somebody in, to kind of fill us up through, like I say, the end of 2025, and then, yeah, we'd reevaluate on, what that looks like. We have 4 IT staff now. Do we go back to 4? We have GIS, we have cybersecurity. We've got a whole backload of projects. We may be in an environment now with how important IT is that we can't, we've had consultants, our cybersecurity audit said, top of the list is you guys need more staff. So it might turn into something that when we reevaluate in 2026, we need 5 IT staff here to kind of make that work. Police are, looking at their specific needs, the ongoing maintenance of a NG 911 system. So there's a lot of unknowns as we kind of ramp up and get things going, and just how massive IT is. It's not a case of, hey, my PC doesn't work, that kind of thing anymore. It's really more of taking a proactive approach in how we can kind of get ahead of things rather than just reactive. That's where we're at right now, honestly.
And further to that, I think we received a big old grant for the Next Gen 911,
Yes.
so that's kind of the stop
Totally.
gap
Yeah.
funding.
There's no budget impact to kind of bringing in this extra resource, and that funding should cover us for the next couple of years for all the equipment, upfront licensing, consultants, staff time. And then there is some discussions with UBCM. They've kind of carved off a portion of that grant to kind of look at a next phase and whether that could help with some operating type costs. So that's another opportunity as well that we'd look at. Yeah, I don't have too much more on the IT side of things. I could update a little bit on Transit Exchange if that's something that, so BC Transit has hired their civic design contract administrator to kind of put together the detailed costing of what the exchange would look like. They have some pretty tight timelines, so I would expect sometime before the end of the year, probably mid-fall, we would be coming back to sort of show you a little bit more about what that looks like once we get those designs back. We do have that Watt Consulting report that had a very high level sort of look at that came out. It was October of 2021 was probably when that plan came out. And that incorporated some of that feedback that we got from the local businesses as far as location of the washroom, loading bay, parking, that type of thing. So that's gone to BC Transit now to kind of incorporate. And we've got a team here as well that's involved in those meetings. So, we've got, our planning department, we've got Chris and myself in there as well, calling in. It's like we've got a team representing the city that's going to be involved in providing feedback and direction to the design.
Councillor Payne has a question. Page has a question.
I know our conceptual designs really never considered this, or maybe we had the conversation, I might have forgot, but I was having a resident describe to me some of the public washrooms they had seen elsewhere where they had been incorporated into retail spaces and were very much integrated into a streetscape change that allowed for additional supervision to be going on in the area, and less of like this is an isolated thing away from everything else, kind of cut out in a different corner, but instead someone selling newspapers or coffee or et cetera, and integrating it into more of a streetscape approach. And I'm wondering if we want to maybe consider how maybe that requires modifications to our building, but how can we have some vendors be able to be set up alongside what might be an exposed area for a bathroom and then people getting off the bus. So something to offer up as a suggestion, possibly probably too late in the game to be thinking about those things, but
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's too late. I think those are all, these discussions that we'll have. Definitely the washroom piece has come up. What that looks like, what's preferred design. We got a couple of different models here, but it's not that we need to use one of those two that we have currently. So there's definitely some options out there. We haven't had a chance to directly connect with the design team yet. So probably once that starts, we can kind of start to offer this kind of feedback and get some direction from BC Transit too on what's worked in other locations. We're not the first to do a transit exchange, right? So
Totally.
yeah, just kind of see what are some models that have worked in other places, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I think Councillor Page.
Oh, Chris?
Yeah. I just was gonna go there, but did you have a question?
Once I've got all the updates, I'm just waiting for a topic to come up that I haven't heard yet.
Okay. Yeah, so at our last very short meeting of the day, we didn't have an opportunity to do an update, so I'm just gonna ask Chris to do an update. He's been working on the vulnerable population issues in town, and so I think that probably we all want to know what the update was. We never had it last time, so.
Thank you, through the chair. So, yeah, a lot has happened with the vulnerable population, unhoused population, particularly in the last week and a bit. This is something that started, sort of a couple of months ago. I don't know the exact timing, but primarily, focused around the Edgewood area, Edgewood Street, or Edgewood Lane, I think it's a lane. Avenue? Edgewood Ave? Okay, well, we've covered them off with the street, lane, and Ave, so. Yeah, the Cubbies, better known as the Cubbies. So, to provide a bit of backdrop around this, or a bit of history, the way that we started approaching the, unhoused issue, or, people experiencing houselessness or homelessness, is this year we wanted to be lean forward a little bit more, and not just simply sort of go in and kick them out of places and expect that we weren't going to find them somewhere else. So with Edgewood, it cropped up a couple of months ago, like I said, in the summer. And it was an area that we acknowledged immediately, and through consultation with the Street Outreach, who are our main sort of partners in this as a social service that actually works with these folks directly. And so we had discussion with them that, I think, identified really clearly that area being so residential, being next door rec centers is, and Scouts Hall and was really not an ideal location for that. Understanding that, like, NIMBYism would say that nowhere is ideal, but really, if you could pick a less ideal spot, I'd be impressed. So that being said, we understood that there was some one person there in particular that had some mobility issues that really was Street Outreach had mentioned that was benefiting from being located there. So, understanding that, we worked with Street Outreach to work with the folks that were using that area to live, to really try and encourage them to lean forward as well. So we're leaning forward. There's an amount of, we aren't going to come and just clear you out of here, but you have to keep, have a certain understanding that you're in the middle of a residential neighborhood, that it's going to be very difficult, for the people that are around you if things get out of hand late in the night, if there's crime, similar situations that we saw pop up when the clubhouse was active before. So we did try and lean forward very heavily with that. And over the last sort of month, things started to escalate quite a lot, where we were starting to get fairly regular reports of sort of aggressive behavior, quite a bit of theft from people's backyards along the alleyway. It's a residential area, so there's a number of homeowners concerned about their security in that area. So again, we tried to work with Street Outreach, gave it a few shots, but it eventually hit the point where, we just acknowledged that, there needed, like, it was no longer gonna work out. And it's unfortunate, and I'll just say, I think one of the issues that we run into is these folks are set up there, and they're established, and it's not necessarily them that are causing the issues. It's the other people from, the street culture that might come around, that might go there to socialize and visit. I mean, we're all human, we are social beings, so they know that there's gonna be somebody there every day. So then it becomes a bit of a gathering place, and unfortunately it became that. So about a week and a half ago, this is all through consultation with Street Outreach, but about a week and a half ago, Street Outreach went along there and let them know that we would be, that we needed them to move along out of the area and to give them ample time to find a new location. We didn't provide locations for them. As we all know in here, we don't have a real good solution for, we have our shelters that exist in town, but if you don't fit into that system, aren't interested in that system, then, or they're full, then, we don't have extra sort of identified areas. So we had Street Outreach go and discuss with them, let them know what the plan was, and gave them lots of time to kind of move their things along. And then last week we actually got in there, folks, Street Outreach went in there and moved the folks along and said, whatever you leave behind, we'll clean up. So give them ample time to move their things elsewhere. And then our crews went in there and cleaned up after that. Now, understanding that this is a good location because it's got that sort of shelter built in, as we got in there, we were, had some concerns around how the area was being treated. For any of those that have been in there, you'll note that there's an old rock wall that's holding up High Street. A number of the rocks had been pulled out of there, for not sure what reason or what effect, but that, sort of gave us another level of risk with having that, anybody sort of living in there again or using that as shelter again. So what we are doing going forward is we are going to pour some concrete in there to one, kind of solidify the toe of the slope a bit. There might be some benefits there, but it'll just be sloped concrete. So it won't be a place where people can go there it just won't be amenable to staying in those cubbies anymore. So that's where we're at with that. The folks, as far as we can tell now, I just had sort of the first confirmed that there's a couple of folks that have moved down to the peninsula on the dog walk. There's also the camp at Government Road where there's some people established there, where there's also room. And then as well, we know that there's people still out at the pull-out at the Park and Ride on the way to Castlegar there, so just a little bit beyond Government Road. Just have a look at my notes here. Yeah, so all in all, really tried to lean forward to make that site work. Things started escalating. It was identified. Councillor Woodward and Payne and myself attended a meeting at the Scout Hall where the Scouts and Girl Guides were just going to get ready to start meeting again in the evenings. They were very concerned. They'd had multiple break-ins in the facility there, consistently having to clean up sort of the leftovers of the drug use, so needles around the area. And all of that combined with the theft of the other properties and the reports just, came a time that we had to move people along. And yeah, tried to again continue to lean forward with giving them a big heads up that we were going to be in there, that they, unfortunately need to find another place to relocate to. And doing what we can to understand that, the scenario is what it is. Also in that location, we understood that there are a couple of the individuals that were staying there that actually had places to go to that were just outside of town, in another town. And so I'm not entirely sure why they were not going back there. I'd heard certain things around the idea that, during the summer it's easier to be here. It's difficult to get some of the drugs that they want to use where they otherwise live, so they come into town here. So, it's an interesting thing when you understand that they actually have a place to go in different communities, but they're occupying these spots because of the season or, access to some of the things that they need. So that's it on that. I'm not sure if there's any questions, but I can move on afterwards.
Yep.
Yeah, a question about Government Road. How is it, well, broadly speaking, is there something we can do without incurring liability to help? I think there's a toilet there now. I'm not sure who provided that, but can we do more about making Government Road better. I mean, I think as I personally would be okay with investing a little bit to provide some cleanup, some organization, whatever, because it can be pretty bad, and I think as a part of trying to establish norms and wrestle this problem from the side of the broader public good, it'd be great if we could do more to make certainly Government Road at least a little bit more livable.
No, I think we do that. I think I'll let Chris speak to that in terms of, Government Road also suffers from Good Samaritans who probably don't want to turn left and actually take their trash to treasures to the appropriate location. And I think they're doing a world of good for homeless people by dropping off old, mattresses. I mean, no homeless person is packing a mattress on their back to there, but you see that there. And so there have been, what I consider people that consider themselves, I guess, Good Samaritans, dropping some stuff off there that then becomes something that then the city does go in and clean up. And I do believe that's part of what we've been trying to help them with. So I'll just let Chris answer that, and then Councillor Woodward, I'll come to you.
Yeah, so, to speak directly to the porta potty that's there, that's actually supposed to, so that is us that put it there, or Andex put it there. We requested it be at the pullout just down below, so that it still remains a public toilet. It's down there. We had talked to the folks that were living there, and they were very pleased with that solution. And then Andex went and dropped it off where they dropped it off, and we've been leaning on them very hard to move it. So that will be moved eventually. Now, as far as the general site location, Mayor is correct. In fact, we've had a report from the folks there that a contractor actually pulled up, dumped out, the old freezer that's there and the box spring and mattress and just a bunch of junk that they didn't want to pay for out at the transfer station and dumped it out. So we have had a discussion, or we're just working on it now that we've completed the Edgewood. We are having the same team, and I'll go into that team a little bit, is having a discussion, or just started the discussion about the next steps. And we think that it's, going to be a cleanup at the Government Road, whereby, we kind of let them know, hey, we're going to be coming in and, 24, 48 hours, we're going to clean the place. So anything that you don't want, thrown away, identify that, right? And put it here, and then we'll clean up everything else, just because that buildup and not only are there people that are dropping stuff off, but it was interesting. We had anchors in to talk to our public works folks one morning, and we were thinking about them, that they were going to be talking to us about sharps and stuff like that. And one of the main messaging was, you got to stop this trash to treasure thing where everybody's putting things out on curbs, because our population they don't know what's good and they take everything, and then it looks like they're hoarding. So I think that's probably something, that's something that I know that we're looking at as staff on how to kind of correct that. But so we are looking at cleaning up the Government Road camp, or doing a spell in there prior to the snow flying, just to kind of clean it up a bit. And just so you're aware of the sort of group that takes. So it's Street Outreach, which are our partners in this. They know everybody by name. They see them every day. They're fantastic partners in this. So they'll be out there letting them all know, giving them the heads up when it's going to happen. Police arrive when we show up. Fire department does the needle sweep, and then usually we have some public works crews there, but for something like that, we'll likely get our contractors that will come in and do that. But it takes that whole group to make something happen. So it's interesting trying to, coordinate that, while also trying to keep to our commitment with the population living there, right? Like, hey, we're going to be in on Thursday afternoon, but then all of a sudden the two people that are on shift at the fire department get a call and have to go somewhere. So the needle sweep can't have it happen, so everything else gets shut down. So, and then they're wondering, and that kind of happened at Edgewood. There was some mixed messaging around that, and so I think that made that a little rougher for them, that it wasn't that clear day and we didn't show up right then, and so on and so forth. But so we are, leaning forward where we can. I know that Street Outreach also supports them a lot with providing, gas stoves, so that they aren't cooking over open fires, especially during the summer, right? So, from everything that we can understand, like when we the people there are, managing okay. We're still pursuing what other solutions look like, and we're all going to be at UBCM, and I'm sure that's going to be a major topic, right? Is what, this is not a suitable solution where they are right now. We need to have better options there, so.
Great, thanks.
Councilor Wood.
So we've been through this before in COVID. That spot got totally out of control. I don't know if people remember that. It was like just piles of garbage, sort of similar to where it's heading now. It was quite a bit worse. There were all those groups that Chris talked about were involved in that. There were many attempts of like, do you put up like places to sleep, like tents, like little platforms, a bathroom, and out of all that came, this is not a suitable place to have people live through the winter. I mean, there's heavy snow plowing goes on there. It's super cold, wet. It's not accessible to emergency services to properly be able to, park a fire truck there. It's a very small road. So it was COVID time. So then we did the behind the Civic, and that was sort of the alternate. So that was when the NDCC was all closed down. So they had that whole Civic place there where people were in tents, and the emergency services could access it much easier, and it was monitored by anchors. But that government road thing it's not going to work through the winter. I mean, you can't live there through an entire winter in minus 30 or minus 15 or whatever it's going to get. So as far as I understand, we went through this whole process already, and now we're going through it again. At that time, it was very clear we cannot have people living there through an entire winter. So I think there's a health and safety issue generally, just people surviving in that spot through the winter. But obviously this is all known, but I just feel like it's Groundhog Day because we've done this before, and we cleaned it all up, and it was all cleaned up, and then it's gotten out of control again.
Yeah, just on that though, I want to be clear that I think this is a management issue, and that we can't tell necessarily people, where they can't be. Even by law, we can't necessarily do that. And so if that's where people are, I think it's part of managing the crisis is doing what we can to help where people are. And it's not like, I agree, it's not a permanent solution, but maybe there is no permanent solution either.
Councilor Lockenberg, just.
Yep.
Councilor, were you finished?
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I just want to make sure that we've been through this before. Like,
Yeah,
this has
and we've
happened.
cleaned up
And we've
Government
cleaned
Road
it
2 or
up.
3 times already this summer as well.
Yeah.
So, Councilor Page was.
It just, if we think about what the city would look like if we had some sort of garbage strike, it wouldn't look very pretty within a couple weeks as things piled up. It is a management issue. And so I am hearing that creating certainty, maybe a little bit of cycling in terms of predictability for that population is a direction that makes sense over the long term. So it's not necessarily letting things build up to clean them up, but knowing that they actually have a garbage day. And if something's in a spot, someone's coming by once a month to deal with that, or once every 2 weeks when we do garbage day or whatever that looks like. But I also want to really pause this in a second. I know we talked a little bit of potentially having a workshop and having that be facilitated, and working with Interior Health and Selkirk potentially to put that together. I think we need to make sure that when we're having these kinds of conversations, it is including that population in a very meaningful way, so that we're not making those kinds of projections of what is and is not suitable for them, because they need to be part of these kinds of discussions, because the population is not going to disappear anytime soon. So how do we best manage given that reality? We'll include conversations with them directly in my mind. I believe that's what we need to be doing, and I agree with Councillor Lautenberg that it's a management issue. So let's keep leaning in and finding those successes, and I'm hearing that we're doing that.
Yeah, and sorry, I'll just note that we have supplied street outreach with garbage bags, and they've been handing them out to that camp and any of the places that they find people, and saying just put your garbage out and then let us know when it's there. And they're there 5 days a week, right? They're checking on them, and so we've picked up like numerous bags of garbage from there whenever they call our crews swing by. And it's just gotten to a point now where, you know, there's from what I understand, one individual in particular that you know really has attachment issues with stuff. And so, you know, we actually went out there. Street Outreach asked us to go out there because the camp had said, hey, we'd like you to come out and, you know, can you clean up this stuff that got dropped off here by this contractor? And we went out there. It was Friday afternoon, and Street Outreach was off. They weren't able to make it, and it wasn't good. You know, our crews went out there and to pick this stuff up, and that individual got pretty confrontational. So we're just going to stick to the pod now, that group that goes out there. But if ever there's garbage bags, Street Outreach will continue to give them garbage bags, and they just need to put them out there, and they give us a call, and our crews by there within the hour usually. So
Thanks.
Councillor Tate.
Hi, who funds street outreach?
It's grant funded
Grant funded.
primarily.
it's community services, not Nelson Cares.
Nelson Community
Your services, and they
through
get it from grants,
Yeah.
of which we want more of. And we want people to stop writing grants. We want core funding.
We want core funding.
It's my constant ask.
And I would, or sorry, Jeff.
Just to maybe echo what Councillor Page was saying, just that it's kind of maybe tempting for people to say that, well, like that's not a livable situation, and for many, for me, it's not a livable situation, and maybe for nobody else in this room, it's a livable situation. But the choice in that, when you're in that situation, the choice isn't as stark, and I think that there's you can live through a lot of stuff that I don't want to live through. So I think it's been spoken to numerous times on the table. I think everybody understands that, but we do have a winter coming up. In the past, there's been like very catastrophic events with cold spells and everything like that. And I think we just need to like be cognizant that this really is, you're talking about public safety and all of that stuff. The people that are most unsafe in the coming 6 months are going to be the people living in that situation by far. So, yes, Government Road is not an ideal place to live by any stretch of the imagination, and yet it's not a permanent solution. Until we can come up with an actual solution that makes more sense, I think what you guys are doing is what needs to happen. You know, we're managing a situation. We're not solving a situation. If we were doing that, it would, you know, that's some radical moves right there, and we'll see if we have the appetite for that or not. But I just want to maybe just speak to that. Like, we're going into something that's far from ideal for anybody really, but definitely less ideal for the people that are living there, but they have to live somewhere. And like Councillor Page was saying, it's not a population that's really going anywhere. They're just going from the Cubbies to Government Road, or from the Cubbies to the dog park or whatever, and they're moving around, but they're still here, and that's not going to change. So solutions that make that as painless as possible for the people that have to go through it, I think that would be something that I'm definitely in support of.
Okay. Being mindful of the time, we always think that, gee, we'll never use up this time at the front end of the meeting, but it is 6 o'clock, and we are going out for dinner this evening, so I don't want to cut this conversation particularly short, but does everybody feel that they've had their questions answered? Are we all okay? And if we could then have somebody move for recess. Thank
Temporary
you,
adjournment.
Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor of recess for dinner? Thank you, and we'll see you back at 7 o'clock. Including our
Any other recommends?
Want me to get you something?
Yeah, if you don't, you're gonna put the kettle on and then just pour it into the.
Okay.
And then Wednesday is
I'm doing some canoe trip or something on Monday.
It's good.
Indigenous led.
Okay, everybody. I'll just tap the pen. Hopefully you don't have to move on to the gavel. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to our audience. And, you know, the best laid plans. We always think that we have more time than we have. And what we haven't had a moment to do is council reports. So not to go into any major detail, but perhaps if a few people have something they'd like to report out on, we'll spend the first 15 minutes here and then we'll get into the rest of the agenda. There's quite a few people here that are looking to witness item number 12, the passing of the bylaw regarding the Memorial Park amendments. So, and if I could have a motion to reconvene before we start anything else, moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. All those in favor, and that carries. So, council reports. Anybody have one? That Councillor Payne, and then Page, and then Councillor Payne, and then Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, and with permission, I think there's a PowerPoint that we can put up for mine, so I'll kind of go back in time and I'll start with what me and Councillor Payne were up to this weekend. We took part in the Columbia Basin River Conversations, which was a canoe trip up in Burton around the Arrow Lake Reserves as part of a wild site programming to have local elected leaders from across the Kootenay boundary come and learn about the reservoir system and the Columbia River Basin Treaty processes that's going on now, and do some in the water and through the course of the weekend have conversations about what the local impacts are for this and how we can have an effect as local government at advocating for our area and our region within the river treaty process. And so here we have some at Caribou Creek, I believe it was, the kokanee salmon spawning up there. We had some campfires and guitars were certainly brought out, and our second day over across the Fauquier Ferry to launch out to Mosquito Creek. And, you know, it was a really good collection of people from across the whole area. We got to make some really wonderful conversations, and I'll maybe just pass it to Councillor Payne if she wants to add any additional context, because she was there the whole time too.
Yeah, it was a spectacular event. If you had, we were incredibly fortunate. If you had ordered weather, you would not have gotten a better weekend. Clear blue skies, not too hot, and the lake was pretty placid. There was a range of canoers. They're planning to do it as an annual thing. Oh, I'm sorry. They're planning to do it as an annual event, so I would highly recommend it to other councillors. They did bring in 4 youth who had participated in the 2-week, what was the name of that?
Field school.
Field school that Wildsite has done on a number of different occasions, learning more about the Columbia and Kootenay River systems themselves and how that treaty and the damming and all the repercussions that followed that have affected us, and deepening their understanding of what's involved in the negotiation, which are so incredibly relevant to everyone who lives in the basement and in the basin. And we saw that, I'm sure everyone's seen the news stories about the Arrow Lake levels. We saw that firsthand, and the somewhat dire repercussions that causes in many instances. So understanding why that happens and if there's ways that we can do it differently as we negotiate the new treaty coming up, highly worthwhile. And we just had the connecting over 2 nights like that in the canoes around the campfire. There's nothing like it. We just met some very incredible, people from Sparwood to Nakusp, I guess, was sort of
Up to Revelstoke.
Up to Revelstoke, Councillor Gar. It was just awesome. So highly recommend. Make sure to jump on board next time. It was a great experience.
Was.
Thank you for the slideshow, Councillor Page.
You're welcome. The only other two things, if I can, and I'll maybe leave some room for others to comment, but I had the pleasure with the mayor and Councillor Woodward of participating in the Pride events over the course of the weekend and the parade. So we took the Ford Lightning in the parade and handed out candy and enjoyed all of the good organizing and events that the Nelson Pride Society had put together. It was quite a well-run event this year. Everyone was very jovial, and it was a great place to celebrate the inclusion and diversity that this community is really well known for.
No pictures?
I don't have a slideshow of that one.
It doesn't have a slideshow.
I'm just not a slideshow guy. I didn't think to make slideshows for all the things. I could do them more often if you want.
He did this slideshow on the fly because I just asked about it when we
Staff
got
did,
here today.
staff did. Chris
okay.
did it, but I
Thank you. So great.
won't put him in that spot next time.
Okay.
The only other thing I want to bring up is from Rec Commission since our last update, just to get into the nitty gritty of business. So I think two highlights from our commission meeting is that the civic operations will be brought in as an in-house position this year. We put out for RFP after the retirement of a long-time individual who had been taking care of that facility. We hadn't received an applicant that met the criteria that we were looking for, so we're going to bring that in-house and use our existing staff or some additional staff to do some training, and we'll see how that works for a year and then put it back out to RFP is the expectation for next year. Give a little bit more time to find the right candidate. And then the numbers of the facility are spectacular. We are seeing impressive utilization rates. Just as a comparison, between the 2019 spring and the 2023 spring, we have a 64% increase in youth numbers. We have 43% more family individuals, and we have 32% more adult individuals. So it's having a positive impact on revenue in terms of our user fees we're charging. It is keeping that facility full. Anyone who's been through there throughout the summer, which is typically a very quiet time, it has been packed, very busy, almost reminiscent of post-Christmas time, which is also a very busy time. But it is the facility is very well used at this current state. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, Councillor Payne.
Okay, I'm going to try and move fast. Lots has happened. August 31st, International Overdose Awareness Day. Attended an event down at Lakeside Park with over 100 attendees. It was beautifully done with Donna Wright leading us, opening and closing that circle in that way that really, I believe, only she knows how to do to help make everyone feel held. And coming together as a community around that grief of the losses that have been experienced is such a valuable thing, and I hope we'll all be able to attend next year. I also wanted to mention Pride, both from the flag raising right outside in front of City Hall, all the way through to the parade. The community just came out in full force. It was exciting to see. I wasn't in the parade because I am a road marshal, and we had lots of road marshals this time instead of the 3 we had last year, so I did not have to jog along beside the parade. I was very grateful for that. Councillor Page has already talked about the fun canoe trip we were out on. I'm just going to mention a couple of events that are going on around our community right now. One is the Elephant Mountain Literary Festival, one of the longest running festival for, they call it for writers, but I'm a reader, so I call it readers and writers, in a small rural community. Highly successful, the number of authors that we attract to our town, but they have shifted it from the summer to the fall so they can get on a bit more of a circuit. I guess when the authors get going, they sort of line up how they're going to travel along together. I am going to mention the event that's sponsored by the Meir Center of one of the authors that has come in is John People keep calling him Valiant, but that's not the way his name is spelled. So I'm going to call him Vaillant, which is how his name would be pronounced in French, and just wait until Thursday night to hear him say it himself. This book could not be more relevant to what we are experiencing right now. And as he closes off in the epilogue, he says, we all live in the wooey. And that's not a party town. So if you don't know what the wooey is, you maybe need to go out and find it. Not trying to sell books, highly recommend it. And if you don't have your tickets for Thursday night, he is as wonderful a speaker as he is a writer. I would highly recommend. Just going to mention one more thing. I was at the fentanyl task force meeting this morning. Not a surprise. So many wonderful individuals working to support our vulnerable population in the city. And it's such a challenge when I see those frontline workers and I hear words like, devastated, overwhelmed. They're looking for the resources to hold themselves together and in good mental and physical health as they support these individuals. And as we talked about earlier, going into an even more challenging time when the weather gets cooler and rainy and we still don't have enough housing. Sad fact, the overdoses due to substance use are now the leading cause of death for youth in our province. Much more work to be done, and fortunately in our community, and I'm sure many others around the province, we have incredible resources and commitment by passionate people who really want to do the right thing and move us forward. That's what I've been up to.
Councillor Woodward, then Councillor Lockenberg.
I just have one piece, which is that I went to the Emergency Management Committee meeting this morning, and that's where all levels of emergency management in the city come together with staff and discuss. It's 4 times a year and discuss like where we're at, sort of a state of play. And I think the one thing that was really stuck with me was how lucky we were this summer. So there's still 400 fires burning across BC, and we're talking 40,000 hectare fires, just massive destruction of the forests. But in our little West Kootenay bubble, we were extremely lucky. We had some rain events that happened earlier in the year, and then actually throughout the summer we had some pretty good soaking. So we got away very, very lucky this year. But the other piece was, since I've been sitting in this seat for 6 years, I've really watched the emergency management of our town gel together and become an incredible unit of communicating with each other and working with the RD and the private property owners and West Arm Park. And so it's really, I'm really seeing these kind of linkages coming together. And then they're planning on doing all kinds of tabletop exercises of like, the full town evacuation, because of course we saw in Hay River and Yellowknife, Yellowknife is 20,000 people, so considerable sized towns having to be emptied. So it's now even more pertinent than ever that we practice this. And the other piece was getting staff trained so that if emergency operations center has to kick in really quickly, people know what they have to do, where they have to go, how to use the equipment down there. So I would say generally I feel really, really confident where we're at. But the fact of the matter is climate change is hitting hard and will continue to. And one thing I've heard is that each summer will be the coolest summer that we'll have. Not necessarily like there'll be variations between summers, but the general trend line will be drier and more heat and more wildfire. And so we have to continue to work at getting better dealing with that. So, but yeah, really very uplifting and reassuring people we have working behind the scenes on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Lockenberg.
So with Tom Duell, we went to meet with Brittany Anderson about regional transit, and this is in lead up to us going to UBCM next week. we've got a pretty clear ask now, so I just wanted to quickly share that with you. We have a resolution before UBCM, as you know, that's asking for a doubling in transit funding. That's a blunt number. There's a lot more nuance to it that we need to know, and when we talk to ministers and MLAs next week, as well as look for allies amongst West Kootenay transit local electeds, but also any rural transit, any elected that represents a rural transit area. So specifically, we have 32 priorities in the West Kootenay rural transit service. It represents about $600,000 in funding gap for local government. So we're looking for $600,000. That's a pretty key number to meet those priorities. And one of the key messages about rural transit is that there's a sense that our provincial counterparts don't clearly understand the difference between urban and rural transit, and how investments in urban transit often result in more convenience. Investments in rural transit represent a death spiral or a virtuous cycle. Like if we don't get a route, for example, the number 10, if we're missing a number of routes, or there's people are missing work, they're losing faith in the transit, then they're going to go buy a car, and then they're lost. In the urban context, that just doesn't happen. So there's a fundamental difference that we need to communicate really clearly. And we've got our MLA on board. There's a new rural development strategy coming from the province to be announced next Friday at UBCM. And this is a perfect time for us to really advocate strongly for that $600,000 investment. And even more specifically, the use of that funds, which is really important and where the province can really play a role here, is on 3-year pilots. If we try to introduce a new route, like say a daily commuter route to Selmo and back, it's very difficult for us to do the initial lift. It takes time for that route to get riders, for people to change their habits and get word of mouth going. So we're looking at about a 3-year time frame before we even know if the route is going to be viable or not. We can't, as local governments, especially rural local governments, can't carry that 3-year period, that 3-year time frame for a new route. So if that can be the ask, one of the asks we make to our provincial counterparts, I think it'll fall in receptive ears. 2, it's quite specific and so quite actionable. And then 3, it's something that aligns with their own broader vision about improving affordability in rural BC. Thanks.
I can speak to the grand opening of the composting facility outside of Selmo. Lots of folks were there. It's a really exciting 10 years in the making, so definitely predates me sitting at the table, but it was great to see so many people out, and curbside collection has begun in Castlegar and other places, and this is where we're going to be sending our pre-treated organic waste as well. So it's a really fabulous, incredible, expensive facility. So I'm excited to see us trying to meet some of organic waste diversion goals in the community. And next up would be like industrial commercial, right? It's exciting.
Exactly. Exactly. So, okay, I have just a couple of things, I guess, to add. So, it's been we've been a month or 5 weeks, seems like, since we met. And I just want to start by saying that I did attend in my role as the chair of the police board, the Canadian, I'm just going to look at the thing because I always get this wrong, the Canadian Association of Police Governance Board meeting in St. John, Newfoundland at the end of last month. And it was very interesting to be involved. That organization has been around for about 34 years. It's attended by police chiefs, civilians that work within the police area, obviously directors of boards. And so there's a very big cross-section from across Canada. Interesting, but again, becomes a bit of a puzzle is that all provinces sort of do their policing, their police act, their board structure. It's all different. One of the things that everybody was looking forward to is with this organization is having them perhaps be sort of like the bank, like the stronghold that has best policies and things that smaller detachments could go to look for policy or for training opportunities or for linkages. So to have that as sort of the place to go to when you're looking for something, because one of the issues, of course, and it doesn't matter what service you're in or what you're trying to provide, resources, both human resources and financial resources, are major issues. And again, training, one of the interesting things that was a big part of the 3-day conference was talking about all of the commissions and inquiries that have happened in the last 10 years. And anybody who's ever read one of those reports knows that they come with a lot of recommendations. And the question was being asked is, why haven't any of these recommendations been implemented? And it's not an easy answer, but it was an interesting discussion to be there to hear the discussion points around that and what little bits could be maybe picked off and that were easier to sort of chew on, that to try to figure out how we get these things. But training was definitely an issue, not only training for police, but training in governance for the boards. That was an ongoing echo that came across quite clearly while I was there. So it was interesting to go. I'm not too sure that as chair of the police board, I will go next year, because in all my hopes that, okay, if it was in the east this year, it would be in the west next year, or at least central Canada. It's in Nova Scotia next year. So I'm not too sure that I'll be going back across country, but hopefully we'll be able to send a couple of our board members. 2 board members did attend, Lena Horswell and Devin Cron, and I think they found it very interesting. And Devin, who's a young man in the community who's very active and that many of us know is our sort of liaison to this organization, and both Lena and I were kind of prodding him to think about maybe getting on the board or how he might do that in the future. He's just joined the police board, so he's still in early stages, but I think that's exactly the kind of people that we're looking for in terms of moving forward, looking for any kind of policing changes and governance changes within the police in general in Canada. I participated in the Pride Parade and the flag raising. I've still got this bad cold. And it was great. It was lovely to be able to drive our new truck. Everybody looked like they're having a great time. It's different. It's different to be in the parade as opposed to be an observer of the parade. And that was sort of a last minute that I was able to figure out how to get the truck. And I know it was also a long weekend, so a lot of people were out of town. And hopefully next year we can have some more councillors, and maybe Councillor Payne, you can say, oh, I can't do road duty this year.
I can't say that. They need me.
And
They need me.
and then you can join in with the candy and stuff. So both Councillor Payne, Councillor Woodward, and myself were at the small opening yesterday of the Elephant Mountain Literary Festival over at the Civic Theatre. And just in terms of the book and the program that you were talking about, Councillor Payne, I did also read that for those people that for whatever reason sort of feel because there is some kind of bug going around the community and maybe they don't want to go to the public meeting, is that you can buy a ticket for streaming, and you can watch the streaming for up to a week after it's on. So that is an option for anybody who isn't quite comfortable maybe, or like myself, who isn't feeling all that great. I don't know that I'd want to go to the Capitol Theatre while I'm still sporting a bit of this cold. So that's an opportunity to go. Following up on some of the things you were talking about, Councillor Woodward, after I was in the fentanyl task force meeting for only half the meeting today, I usually attend the full meeting, but we had another wildfire and drought update for local government, mayors and regional districts chairs. And you're right, there's still 400 active fires. Year to date, 2,124 fires in the province. A massive amount, the biggest burn ever in BC, 2.32 million hectares have burnt so far. A number of these fires in the north are not under control. There's still a number of evacuation orders and such out. There is new emergency management legislation that is coming down that our team has actually looked at and has made some suggestions around it. They're hoping to table that when the House first starts to sit. I heard October 3rd is the day that that might get tabled on the go forward. And then, of course, yesterday we heard the announcement from Premier Eby that there will be an expert task force struck looking for participation from across the province on wildfire, drought, and heat emergencies to improve prevention and response. So we'll have to see how that unfolds over the next few weeks as they look at what the terms of reference for that committee might be. And gosh, I've got a whole list of things, but just to finish on a kind of a nice note. So I would like to take this opportunity actually to welcome the graduating classes of 62, 63, 64, who are celebrating 60 years since graduating from LV Rogers. They're actually here today and tomorrow. So if you see some people that look like they're having a lot of fun, it's probably some LVR grads reminiscing about Gyro Park. And I don't know what you did in the 60s to sort of bad behavior at LVR, but who knows. And then this coming weekend, we are seeing the 72, 73, and 74 classes coming in to celebrate 50 years. So the tourists are still coming to town, and just want to welcome back those that graduated from here, some of which are still here and never left, which is good, because I think you can grow up in Nelson and still be here and work and raise your family. So yeah, you might see them out wandering around. I'm sure they'll be enjoying the good weather that's still in the forecast going through the weekend. So that's my report. If anybody had any questions, I'd be willing to entertain them. Okay.
Actually, I forgot that I was supposed to say something.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Just that sort of upcoming community event that maybe might fall through the cracks. So I wanted to say something about it. It's actually happening at the Capitol. It's called Journey Through Las Americas, and it's sort of a presentation of music and dance and poetry, and all from members of our community that are from the Latino community in Nelson. It's a bunch of people that, you know, I'm personally connected with through my family, and I just know that the quality of the show and of the art is going to be amazing. So I just urge anybody that is interested in those people and their stories and those people that make up part of our community to go check that out. It's going to be.
Do you have the date?
show.
Is that the 23rd?
It's the 23rd.
That's what I thought. Okay.
That's right.
So 23rd, for those that are able to make that would be, I think it's going to be a spectacular show there at the Capitol. Thanks for bringing that up. And I'll just bring up, because he'll never say it himself, but next week, Councillor Pinero will be jetting off to Ireland with four athletes from Nelson.
Yeah.
From Nelson to be in a boxing, maybe you could.
It's
Fill in the
like
blanks.
a regional tournament in Dungarvan, Ireland, which is somewhere in Ireland.
True. So just be watching your phone,
At the very
because
least.
both Storm and Bill, our media that are here, will probably be trying to contact you that week for an update on how our athletes are doing,
Right.
and how Ireland is.
Yeah, Ireland. Beer, I think, is a thing.
Yeah.
It's a weird.
If the past Mayor Dooley was here, he'd be telling you to make sure to have a Guinness.
Right.
So, thank you for that. Okay, we don't have any requests or delegations, but we do have the bylaw coming up. So, if somebody would
I can move the recommendation.
like to move the recommendation,
I'll second that.
thank you. And could you read the recommendation, Councillor Tate, please?
That council, oh, you didn't read the intro. Don't you usually read the intro?
Yeah, I usually do read the intro,
Don't-
but you know
don't
what,
you
I was,
read the intro?
I'm trying to look really,
Do you want me to read it?
like suave here because
He's trying to
they,
find
they,
it.
they stack the, items in the wrong order, so please read the analysis as well.
Traditional burial practices often involve embalming, non-biodegradable caskets, and concrete vaults, which have significant environmental and financial costs. In response to these concerns, natural and green burials have emerged as sustainable alternatives. Staff are presenting City of Nelson Memorial Park Cemetery Amendment, Bylaw number 3305, 2015, to Council. The amendment bylaw would allow for natural burials in the Nelson Cemetery. Council is requested to pass first 3 readings to the City of Nelson Memorial Park Cemetery Amendment Bylaw number 3579, 2023, 2023.
And so it's the first recommendation has been moved and seconded, and that is that council pass first and second reading to the City of Nelson Memorial Park Cemetery Amendment Bylaw number 3579, 2023. Is there any further discussion on this topic, council? Councillor Payne?
I do have a couple of questions around this. There was a question about an increased cost of service that I was sort of interested in more information on. I'm trying to understand that. Was that from looking at other communities and what they're doing, or?
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, along with natural burial comes additional maintenance required at the sites. With the absence of a grave liner, it essentially holds up, all of the material so it doesn't slump at all. Without that there, as the whatever the person is
Natural
turned in,
process
yeah,
happens.
exactly right, and so then it slumps down. So there is additional work required there. It's something that we will be reviewing when we do our Parks and Cemetery bylaw in 2024 to better understand. And as such, we felt that there wasn't a need to lean forward on it right now and try and fumble at it, those additional costs. So we do anticipate to be bringing something to council in 2024 once we get that, do that Parks and Cemetery master plan and better understand what our true costs are, not just for, natural burial, but all forms of interment up at the cemetery, because we recognize that there's a need to review those costs.
So that's something that we went to other communities, looked at what they're doing around natural burial, and there is an increased cost over our regular burial. That's what I'm trying to understand, where we got that information. So it's from other communities.
Well, and mostly it's from the expertise of our crews up there. They're familiar with what happens and then, what the purpose that the liner serves.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that too. I'm just wondering how other communities are dealing with this, because to me, a natural burial would be less expensive, but maybe from the other side, the other costs of the embalming and the casket, it'll do that. Okay, I'll just take a look around, and maybe our experts in the
Yeah. and I
chairs
think-
have some information around that.
Yeah, so I think a lot of those other savings are probably on the
Yep.
private funeral home side. There might be, presumably there's savings there. There might be a little bit more cost here, so, but we'll look more into it when we, as Chris said, when we have a chance to look at this more in depth.
There has been on the table, Councillor Payne, just so you're aware, for a number of years, discussion that because this isn't a big service, it's one of those ones that tends to fall through the cracks. And so just have to be careful there. I think it falls. I just don't want to fall in the hole. So it's been on the table for a long time to look at our costs in general in terms of cemetery maintenance, and also the fact that we have an agreement with the Regional District of Central Kootenay as they use the cemetery site as well. And so this will be just part of it. And I mean, it could end up at the end of the day that there is no additional cost, but there has been on the table for, gosh, a number of years, probably even going back, I think we talked about increasing cemetery costs back in 1999. So, yeah, I think it's time for a review of the costs. Councillor Page.
I sense that we'll have a discussion about this down the road, but specifically when we look at the relationship between cost recovery from user fees and cost recovery from taxation, or revenue generation from taxation, what principles or balance will we be trying to strike up there versus maybe some of the other parks? Certainly, like Lakeside, we have field rentals, and we have some ideas of costs around that, but I would be pretty interested on how we're breaking that out into a set of principles when it comes to what we're charging up there and how much of those operational costs we're trying to recover versus how much we're just considering generalized common benefit and therefore coming from taxation. I just don't know where those lines are right now.
I think certainly the maintenance of the park is not being charged to people that are as part of the burial process. We're, I think, mostly trying to cover costs of the direct costs of burials as opposed to the general maintenance of the facility. But it's a good point. We will look at sort of what is that pricing formula? How much is that our cemetery is a park in our community, so it serves a broader purpose than just a place for burials. It's a community green space. So right now, like I said, I think that's kind of what we've tried to do in the past is try to recover direct costs of burials versus sort of ongoing maintenance. Where I think you see a budget every year of I can't remember $200,000 or something of cost to maintain the space itself.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Payne.
I just want to go back and get clarity then. Basically, this amendment to the bylaw offers the natural burial until we do the full redo on the parks master plan, at which time we'll then discern whether the fees would be higher. But if we pass this today, well, now and then the final reading, whenever, then, and someone wants a natural burial 2 weeks from now, we don't have a specified additional fee. We're just putting it in there to,
Just a heads up.
as a heads up.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and that master parks plan, which will look at green burials, is slated for 2024. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I had understood what I heard. Thank you.
Any further comments or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation number 1? And that carries. And can I have a mover and seconder for the second one? Moved by Councillor Lockenberg, second by Councillor Tate. The council passes third reading of City of Nelson Memorial Park Cemetery Amendment Bylaw number 3579, 2023. Any further discussion, council? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the next item, we have recommendations from staff. Item number 13. Council is requested to review its sports ambassador policy and consider amending the policy to make changes regarding the procedure for selecting a successful candidate. So, thank you all for coming.
Move?
Okay, and is there a seconder? Councillor Tate. Okay, discussion. We have quite a lengthy report here about potential changes to the program. Councillor Woodward, you moved it. Do you have any opening comments?
Well, I think definitely something has to be done just to sort of revitalize this process. I think we have such a rich history here of sports accomplishment at the highest levels, and I think we could kind of dig into that more. And I think what I really appreciated about this, if I can find it, here we are. that it's not just a person. Where was that? I'm sorry. It's one of the. It's in the policy. I know I'm looking at it here. Here we are. So this is in procedure number 2, that the sports ambassador may be an individual athlete, a group, or a team, which I think is a really good addition. And yeah, I just think it's a good update, and hopefully it'll kind of expand the whole program out to include a lot more people.
Councillor Payne.
I also think this is an amazing program. We do have a lot of richness, depth, and talent here. What I'm missing is, it seems more like a communication issue of getting the information out to this particular community that we want the nominations. So we're doing one method, we're advertising. Are we reaching out directly? Are we going through the rec commission at the RDCK? Are there different ways that we haven't done? Because before I would go to this, I would like to understand why we aren't successful in attracting more applications, because that's part of this challenge that we're facing, isn't it?
I'll have Gabe speak to that, because we have reached out in other areas, not just through
I
advertising.
didn't read it in here, did I? I just read the, the advertisement. Okay, I thought maybe I missed it.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just to quickly address that point from Councillor Payne, I do believe in the report we did mention some of the efforts that we've underwent. Last year in particular, when we realized that, coming up to the deadline, we only received, I believe, 1 application and 1 nomination, we did reach out to a group of probably about 20 to 25 sports groups, such as, Nelson Soccer Association, Glacier Gymnastics, et cetera, to try to solicit more nominations. And ultimately, it did not result in any. So I'm not sure where the disconnect is. My understanding was that, 4 or 5 years ago, when I, began my tenure at the city, this is a program that I brought to council, and it was in response to a request from sporting groups. So it would be nice to see more involvement. I don't believe it's because we're not reaching these groups. I'm not sure how else we would advertise the program, which is the reason for the policy recommendation. And just to note as well, the change is meant to offer more flexibility to how the policy is administered, because right now it specifies a call for applications. So as noted in the report, if council had another idea as to how we might solicit more applications, this policy would provide the flexibility to do that in the future. The recommendation before council for this year is to consider using a process similar to what council has done with the Sustainability Leadership Awards. I believe that's an appropriate avenue to go down, because it preserves the program, and it allows council, based on your knowledge of what's going on in the community, to put forward nominations and to consider their merits as a group.
And can I just add, I think we found that same, as Gabe mentioned, the sustainability awards, we sort of ended up in that same place where we weren't getting a lot of applicants. I think council was proactive in that space to, reach out to the groups that you're connected in, and we see the same opportunity here that, I think you want to be, getting the community and reaching out into the community. That's, like I said, we found that successful in the sustainability awards, that council really took it on themselves to connect with their folks that they're connected with, and it wasn't just council coming up with names off the top of their heads. They were really reaching out to get those names.
I've got Councillor Payne, then Councillor Page.
I guess the question that I have then is that, are we trying to implement something that doesn't have value to this community? Like, if it had value to the community, would they not come forward? Am I missing something? And I don't know, because it's not a community where I have deep connections, so I'm just asking the question, very curious to understand.
If I may, Mayor, my personal opinion is that it does have value. Maybe it's easy to contrast this, for example, to the cultural ambassador program. So with the cultural ambassador program, there is a committee in place that is a nice kind of sampling of the different arts, culture, and heritage groups in the community. And I feel like they've really taken it upon themselves to encourage applicants to bring forward nominations. Whereas this program is administered by staff, there's not a corresponding sports committee at the city that pushes this out to folks. So I don't know if it has the same traction, but I do think it has a lot of value. I know that some of the previous sports ambassadors have really taken that role on. I think this year's sports ambassador was a good example. I think, Jasmine was really excited about that designation, and even if it doesn't necessarily come with a lot of work, it is an honor. And I think that when it's awarded by council in December, the recipient is recognized in the community, and it does have value.
I am at Loganberg and then Panero. Sorry, wait, Paige, sorry,
Yeah.
there you are. Gosh, I put the P and then I put the P and then I kind of like,
Yep. Yep. So there's a lot of names.
so
swapping
then
going on there.
Loganberg and then Panero. So you're next.
I agree with some of the sentiment. Obviously, I've said before, I think this needs to sit with, or at least we need to figure out how we can engage our regional district partners in a conversation like this, because we really do operate as a district when it comes to recreation a lot of the time, when it comes to sport a lot of the time. There were some suggestions that had been conveyed to council about how this might be a role, much like the cultural ambassador, of bringing that sports ambassador in for the front end of one or two of our meetings throughout the year, to add some responsibility to it, to report back in. So I think we may want to consider what the calendar of the year may look like and where those touch-ins may be. Like, are they being invited to the galas, at the annual reception? Maybe there's some other pieces there we want to see happen when it comes to what that means to be the ambassador, and what that role and how prominent it is within our community. But I think it goes hand in hand with how we deal with all of the recipients of these ambassador roles. So I like the flexibility. I understand where it comes from. It may also be a consideration of, when we go through 5 years of this and start running out of candidates, are these terms too short? Do we want a 2-year term for something like a sports ambassador? Also have them come through a few events, and maybe their second year is going to have a lot more chutzpah to it. So it might also be not attractive just from a monetary value. Does that $1,000 really make sense? How long ago did we determine that $1,000 was the honorarium? Does that still is that still enticing for what we may ask of them to celebrate our community? So for now, I'm in support of this and the flexibility it operates, but I think let's keep kind of asking those same questions around our ambassador roles and how we can integrate them into our meetings and raise their prominence, so that we're celebrating what they're doing and they can celebrate what their areas are doing.
Councilor Lockwood.
I was hoping to go after Jesse, since he's been a sports ambassador, and I wanted to hear what he had to say, because that might negate me needing to say anything. So
Sorry, there we go.
So be a sports
That
ambassador and a
there was a
counselor.
political pass.
no, anyways.
I don't know if what I have to say is going to help much, but I think having been, I am a part of a sports organization in town, and I know in my particular context, it's a very full on situation that I'm in. And I know that, I have friends in the soccer world and other places, and they do this like this is their life and this is what they do. And that is why you get people excelling at this level, is because they literally don't do much else. So the time to sift through names and figure out who is going to be, I think they're just busy. And I think if we can help in any way, like sort of present it to them, I think that would probably make it easier. I don't think that it's not valuable. I was super honored to be the sports ambassador at one point. It was great for me. I thought it was, it felt great. The recognition felt awesome. It was valuable for me. I know Jasmine's very excited about it as well. I think everybody that got it is excited about it. I think there's value in that. And I also think there's value, and this is sort of, I'm not sure about this yet, I'm still sort of thinking about it, but I think when we present something like that, this is a very small town, and there's a tendency in small towns to sort of celebrate, I don't want to say celebrate mediocrity, but it's very easy. I could easily be the best boxing coach in Nelson. I am the only boxing coach in Nelson, and so therefore the best by default. And I think that's
And the worst.
And the worst.
And we probably have the most boxing coaches like per capita in Nelson.
That's very easy to excel it at a very local level, and if that's what we celebrate as a town, that is what we're going to get. And I think what I like about this award or ambassadorship or whatever is that it gives us the opportunity to highlight people that are going above and beyond what is normally expected of somebody that's coming from a town of 10,000 people. Like what Jasmine's doing is exceptional on a world stage. She's not the best runner in Glade. She's in Europe. It's a different, and it's in speaking from like as a professional, it's very different. We can be the best hockey team in the KIJHL or something like that. It's different to be the best hockey team in the world, or to be invited to a hockey tournament that is amongst the best in the world. That is a different level of commitment, a different level of work, and I like that us as a city council can recognize that and celebrate that, because I feel like that it engenders more of the same and gets us out of our bubble. I think that's really important as a community. And that kind of leads me back, and I kind of like the idea, like when I was sports ambassador, I didn't do anything except what got me the sports ambassadorship, which was to take boxers all over the world and get medals at nationals and pump the name of this town all over the place. I didn't go to council meetings and I didn't go to galas, but I did what I was being recognized for. And I think that there is a certain, because I know how busy it is and what a commitment being at that level is, I hesitate to burden somebody with that obligation if they're already, if you're too busy being at the World Championships in Spain to come to the gala, I think that's going to be fine. Some responsibility or an invitation is always, I think, appreciated, and it's an honor to be invited to those sorts of things, but I don't know that it needs to be tied to anything. I think we need to celebrate people for what they're doing, and what they're doing is something exceptional that almost nobody else is doing. That's why they're getting the award, and I think that's kind of good enough.
Thank you for your insight on that, Councillor Pinero. It's really important for us all to contemplate, and it's great that you were able to be the sports ambassador in 2021, and then you can share the insight in terms of what we should be striving for here. Now, back to you, and then back to Councillor Page.
I'm good.
Oh,
I'm good.
Okay, no, sorry then. No, then it's Tate, and then on the second round, he gets to go again. So,
To go again. What I like about this policy, thank you, Mayor, and through the chair. What I like about this policy is actually different than what Jesse pointed out about being exceptional and world class, because it says that acknowledge the contribution of athletes that make to the vitality. I think it should be add to the vitality, well-being, and identity of Nelson. And I think that there's a number of groups, like when we talk about volunteers in soccer or volunteers in hockey or volunteers at the climbing gym and so on and so forth, that contributes to the vitality, well-being, and identity of Nelson. So I think that there is an opportunity for both types of sport ambassadors, and I like that that's encapsulated here.
Councillor Lockenberg, you're taking a total pass.
Yeah, I loved what Councilor Pinero said.
Oh, okay, so he's got it caught. back to you, Councillor Page.
I'll suggest that we pass the policy as amended, as suggested with the, like the wordage. I'm wondering if we're getting to a point where we have enough sports ambassadors, we may want to consider bringing them together to do a process of selecting sports ambassadors.
Well, there's an opportunity for a jury here, so,
Yeah.
yeah, we got to build though, yeah.
Yeah.
And as Panero said, they're busy, so not to burden them too much.
Not to, well, I know. My list of examples was not a, we must do all of these things. It's a list of opportunities we might want to consider to give the role a little bit more meat to it. But I
Yeah.
think we are getting to a point of a jury of former ambassadors would be
Yeah, I think that
partially
we've got one recommendation here which decreases the amount of staff time so they can, as they already have full workloads, can do other things.
We're ready to start building our AI-powered.
What are we building?
An
Could be on it.
AI-powered.
I just took over his machine, so
That was
everyone
Okay.
move
really
away.
interesting.
I
I mean, I know what it was, but it was interesting that it's.
Because we've discussed this sports, like we've discussed this policy a few times and trying to figure out which direction we should go in. And I think if what I'm hearing correctly from Gabe is that this policy, just the way we're changing it, does give us flexibility, because I just want to go back to the, in the previous council, of which Councilors Lockenberg, Woodward, and Page were members along with myself, there was discussion about whether or not we had sort of a juried process or whatever, in terms of then setting up terms of reference to have something like the CDC. And at that point, and I actually saw him, he was in City Hall. I didn't know he was ever going to come back here again, but I saw past Councillor Renwick here earlier this week. And I mean, he at that time said that he'd be more than willing to take on the trying to get a group of people together that would be interested parties, and so that he would do the legwork. And of course, then it would only make sense. I mean, obviously we can have a councillor part of that, but that he would be like the initial chair, just to get things off the ground and running to go out and find those people that would be interested in doing this work to help with the selection of the. So it's still out there, and I'm just sort of thinking, like, do we have the flexibility within what's here in front of us now? Is that, I guess if you're putting it back on council can then easily decide that, okay, well, we're gonna invite, Cal Renwick in and see if this is something that he wants to do, or at least we would have a methodology of looking at doing it like we do the sustainability grants, and that we can continue to work on what it looks like going forward. Because there always has been that thing about cultural does it with a jury group because they have all of those people at the table. I mean, there's probably way more sporting groups than there are arts and culture groups in town. So he's not going to go out and get every sports group, but to get those people to go out and make those inquiries is also another option that has been brought to this table, not with the people that are sitting around it right now, but in the past that has been brought to the table. And I just want to add, as well, like Jasmine is in Europe and is very busy and such. I do feel a bit poorly, because one of the things I did want to see as mayor was the opportunity for these people, if they're in town, to come back. Like, we also haven't seen, it's not just the sports ambassador we haven't seen the cultural ambassador come back either to a council meeting this term yet, and to whether or not to ask. And then I think the idea of invitations to things is where a person wants to look, because we don't want to make them feel that they have to. It's not like, we gave you $1,000, now you have to show up and perform. I think that it's an honorarium, and I think there's things that we could do. But I think having them back if they are in town, because it would just be interesting to hear how her running's been and the places that she's been. And she's an environmentalist. I mean, what is she seeing when she's off running, in terms of the environment? I mean, I think there's lots of things that could be offered there. And also for those that maybe are in town or more sort of local people, or if we're looking at groups or outstanding volunteers, if we look at it in another format, is whether or not we also then invite those people to do things like, I don't know, can't they go and drop the puck at a hockey game? I mean, like, they might be a soccer player or a soccer coach or a soccer volunteer. Could they not, the first game of the season, be invited to drop the puck at the Leafs game, right? Like, so that integration of a different sport. I don't expect a hockey player to go and drop a puck at a hockey game, but it could be a boxer, could be a runner. I mean, there are opportunities. It's just that, you know, the year goes by faster than you can blink an eye. But anyways, a few more people have comments. Councillor Lochinver.
Yeah, briefly, I'm not sure, or I'm not clear when
The fall.
Typically, we've done it in the fall, and we try to have the selection made in advance of the annual reception.
Okay.
Last year, I don't believe there was an annual reception because there was council's inaugural meeting.
Yeah, so we didn't have it, so it wasn't until December.
So given that time, I mean, I think each of us, I certainly can think of 2 or 3 people I would be happy to nominate. I think they would be excellent. Should we just get the ball?
Well, that's why I
going?
think that we have something in front of us now that would get us through
Yeah.
this year, but to contemplate that there's been some things
Yeah.
and that doing this would allow us to not have to sort of come back and necessarily beat up this policy again.
Yeah. I think that's good, and I love Cal as a chairing some committee, but I think that's great for next year. We could just get this thing going ourselves as soon as we need to. Yeah.
And that's really the idea. It provides an additional degree of flexibility where you're not limited to just what you receive.
Yeah, the advertising and the applicants.
Yeah, totally. And I just want to say, I do think this is an important role. I think that it's different from the cultural ambassador. The arts and culture are in a medium in which communication is the art, whereas sports, it's a little bit more about performing physically and in terms of teamwork at a high level. So it's quite different. So I wouldn't expect to compare them. And I think, though, I would love, not required, but love to have our sports ambassador go to 1 or 2 schools to as the sports ambassador as well to inspire kids. And I think that's maybe if we're a little bit more explicit, that we would love to see that. We're not going to require it, but we'd love to see a little bit more of that, reaching out to the kids and doing something with the schools. That would be great.
So councillors, we've got a motion on the floor. It's been moved and it's been seconded. Is there any further discussion on this topic?
I just have one more question.
Yes,
Does that mean we're not going to advertise this year?
that would be, we wouldn't be advertising this year.
Okay.
But we would advertise the successful selection.
Okay.
That would be published.
So I do understand the cost of advertising in print is what we're talking about, is the cost factor here. Is that right?
It's not the determining factor, just to note that.
Yep.
it didn't
But we
seem-
have other means of advertising, right? Can we Facebook and Instagram it? Can we social media it? I think if we don't put it out publicly,
But Council
I don't
can't-
feel,
Not to cut you
am I-
off, but just,
yeah,
I
please,
think the proposal is to not have a call for applications, so we wouldn't advertise that.
at all.
Certainly,
Okay.
we would, announce the successful selection. After it's announced at the annual reception, we could have kind of a, I don't know what you would call it, but some type of, in the star or on social media, some type of announcement that, announces the successful selection.
I think
hear
what
that.
Councillor,
am
I think what
uncomfortable
Councillor
with
Payne is
that.
asking about is how we let people know that as councillors, we potentially will be out shaking the bush, looking for people if we didn't know. It's more about that, like, we're not asking for an application, but is there anything about a general announcement, or could Ginger do something where we have a little blurb to say, that at December we'll be announcing the sports, at the annual general will be, and that selection process is going to be taking place. If you know somebody you think is great, contact your local city councillor. Like that kind of advertising. I think that's what you're asking for. I don't want to steal the words out of your
I think
mouth.
it's the opposite of EDI. this is not inclusive. That's what it feels like to me. If we don't have the door sort of open, I don't know how Jasmine came in. I know she's self-nominated, I believe. So I don't know if she saw the ad or, pardon me?
She
She applied.
She applied, yeah. So I don't know if she saw the ad or if she heard that something was going on.
Call for applications.
That's what I'm saying. How else do we get
So
that
we'll,
type of individual?
We'll take that back to communications.
Perfect,
How about-
okay. I just
we
want to
can-
be inclusive, so we're not, I understand
and-
maybe not everybody's coming in that way, but I think we need to leave that door open.
And feel free on your own, you guys are out there on social media, spread the word.
Okay.
But we'll look at, yeah, we could likely do something from my communication, as the mayor suggested. You know, your city councilors are looking for sports ambassadors. Please let them know if you're interested.
Councillor Pinero.
So just the idea being that we get more applications is the idea, right? That's the problem here, is that.
That we would have more names.
Yeah, Jasmine.
You wouldn't be limited to applications. That was kind of the proposal. I think, again, the policy provides the flexibility for council to go in a number of different ways. The comparison that I was making was what council does for the Sustainability Leadership Awards, which is that there are no applications received or nominations received. Council sits together and each councilor puts forward some proposals, and as a group you come together and have a successful.
So I would just like to see both, like Jasmine's she applied.
Yeah.
When I won it, I had no idea it even existed. Somebody
You were
somebody
nominated.
nominated me,
Yeah.
right? So if it was up to me to apply, I wouldn't have done it. I would like to see, maybe it's just semantics, but like a call for, whether it's a call for applications or a call so that people know to come talk to us.
Yeah.
Some
Not so-
sort of.
We'll do some kind of
yeah.
advertising at the front
It has to
end.
be out there though,
Yeah.
because then we're gonna get, like maybe I, hate soccer, so I'm not gonna pay attention to anybody, and so like that's it. And just by chance, maybe we all hate soccer, so no soccer
would be
players
ignored.
get in.
I agree.
It's like
we
we're
love
sort of
soccer.
at the.
Kate's looking sad.
I don't hate soccer. I like soccer, but it's just an example. Like we're sort of it's at the mercy of whoever's sitting here, in a way that like if they know to come and talk to us, then it's
Yeah.
not.
We'll do some kind of advertising. I think that it needs to have something so that people know that it's going on, and we can discuss it also at rec. We can make it, so that people will hear it. It's just a matter of, it's not going to be waiting for these applications to come in, because I think that there's some really good people out there that probably would never think that they would put in an application, right? Like you said, like you would never have applied for it. So, yeah, we don't.
Can I just say that, let's be clear, every person around this table is for inclusive, diversity, etc. Like we don't have to say that may not be other councillors' priorities. It should be just a given. What we're talking about here is just how do we do it so that it gets to the most people. And by contacting us as councillors, that'll work just fine. It's like nobody is going to filter out applicants or people, okay? So let's not bring that up again.
It's also the perception.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, and I saw everybody's hand go up, I think, almost. Okay, thank you, and that passes. Okay,
Long conversations sometimes.
moving on to item 14. And we have a couple of reports there. So just a reminder that we had the reports, we had corporate services come first on our agenda this evening as a little workshop educational session. So we have item 1, items from finance. Can I have a motion to receive for information?
So moved.
It was moved by Councillor Payne, seconded by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Payne. Oh my God, I am. All those in favor, are any errors or omissions or any?
Nope.
Okay.
Just ask a question. I could ask it later. Well, it's just interesting to me. I don't understand the, I know we have an arborist, on staff because we're retiring an experienced arborist to get a new arborist in. But then the work is done by contractors? Is that how that happens? Because last month we paid nearly $100,000 to.
Yeah, we
people?
do both.
Yeah, okay,
We-
that's all
Nelson
I
Hydro
wanted to
hires
understand. I-
contractors to do some of the work. We certainly don't have enough arborists
Pretty
to,
massive
to
program.
manage
Yeah.
the whole veg.
And I know
management
Hydro's been
program.
doing a lot as well.
It's mostly
Okay.
hydro.
Well, this would be hydro.
Okay, so the arborist sort of goes out and does a bit of the assessment, and then we send the people
No,
out?
our arborists do work on their
They do
own
work,
trees
okay.
and stuff like that. They just don't
Okay,
have
that's
capacity
mainly
to,
what I want to
do the whole
understand.
system.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
So that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that carries. Item 2, we have development services. We have some building permits and statistics there for August. Is there a mover for receipt for information? Moved and seconded, and all those in favor. And just to apologize, we did see the presentation, but to just make it official, could we receive the corporate services mid-year update
Move.
for information? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay. And we are now at, there was no notice of motions. And item number 16, a resolution closing the meeting to the public. It's in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and staff and any approved audiences be excluded from this meeting, and that the meeting of council continue under section 91E for matters regarding the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land and improvements. Can I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Woodward. Seconded by Councillor Pinero. All those in favor? And that carries. So I'd like to thank our guest, Bill, who came not only at 4:30, but came for the whole evening.